July 10th to order. And let's rise and pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Mayor, if it pleases you, I just have one quick question for Jim, follow-up from yesterday. Jim, as I understood the code enforcement, we will retain the 2 enforcement officers, and we're losing someone at the management level. Is that correct?
That is correct. We are losing a planner.
Okay, I just want the feet on the street.
The 2 code enforcement officers will still be employed.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, I'd like to open it up to the public again this morning. Good morning. Your name and address for the record, please.
Herb Whitall, 19 Park Avenue, Vero Beach, City of Vero Beach. I just want to say a few things about budgeting, and I hope that you look at everything that you're cutting, because some of the things you cut affect us. A few years ago, you cut the budget for Parks and Recreation, and it actually raised my taxes 11% because you stopped doing work and turned it over to us to do work on your property, and we still do that. So you may think it looks good on you, but it doesn't affect. It affects us. We're paying more. Secondly, you cut the animal control officer. Who do we go to when we get rabid raccoons or feral cats on our property? Do we shoot them? Or who do we call for that? That's a problem. Thirdly, the county cut their budget. And what they did was, part of what their budget cut was, that machine they have out there that takes all the stuff out of the main relief canal, they don't operate it on Saturdays and Sundays. Well, Sunday, 2 weeks ago, they had an overflow, and all of this grass about this long ended up in our canals and in the lagoon. And guess when Chantal's supposed to hit us? Saturday and Sunday, which means more of that will happen. So when you get budget cuts, sometimes things happen that aren't too good. Thirdly, I listened to Fred Bryan's audio on your website last night, and listening to that, you're budgeting as if you're going to sell the electric utility by the end of the year. It appears to me that, one, there's no way you're going to get that done because of what he said. And secondly, I'm not sure we should sell it before October of 2015 when you know what the Taylor swaps are going to cost you. Because right now we're only getting $5 million out of that sale. And if those things come in at any kind of amount, it's going to make it not worthwhile to sell at all. So I just hope that you take into account all those things when you're budgeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Herb. Does anyone else like to speak to the council? Seeing none, we'll move on to the airport this morning. Good morning, Eric.
Morning, Mayor. Morning, everybody.
You have an opening statement you'd like to make?
Sure. I will say just a couple words. I just wanted to point out as the airport that everybody knows that as a enterprise fund of the city, we are generally self-sufficient, operating on revenues that we collect from land rents and business operations, and not operating on the ad valorem tax side. But also, we, as a department of the city, we were also asked to cut, starting with a 10.9% goal, just like everybody else. I do feel, as the airport director, I have the obligation to the city to maintain a well-trained, well-equipped, and well-led staff in order so that we can be the best general aviation airport in the state, or try to. At least that's one of our goals. As a city government, we also have an obligation to the public to maintain this very valuable asset of the city, worth over $45 million in assets, hard assets, and creating about $350 million in economic impact to the community every year. That's based on that FDOT 2010 study that came out a few years ago. At the same time, the city as a whole needs to cut costs. We're aware of that, and we've taken that to heart. So we looked at this opportunity at the airport to try to keep things in balance with the rest of the city and improve our efficiencies, attempt to spread some of these efficiencies across all parts of the airport enterprise. And we know that we're not the only ones that have to make cuts. The FAA, our big brother, and the FDOT is also have to look at ways to cut. Federal government with sequestration and things like that, those have started to show impacts at airports like Vero Beach. You saw what happened with air traffic control towers and things, and that's still coming again for the next budget year. So we're not sure exactly how that's going to impact us. But in doing our budget, we just proposed a budget assuming that things would continue and the federal government and the state would continue to be able to supply the grants that they have in the past. Keep in mind that a lot of the airport's expenses, when we take a look at the individual line items, a lot of those are sort of out of our control and sort of fixed. There's not much we can do with it. In fact, I was talking to Danielle, who's with me here today, our grant administrator, and we looked over the budget, found out that about 15 to 16% of our budget is actually within our control. The rest of it is fixed. A lot of things there that we really can't do much about. We have payments to Public Works for landscaping, irrigation, drainage maintenance, equipment maintenance, city garage, sign work, things like that goes actually to the general fund, in a sense, from the airport. So we don't really want to cut things that would be going to the city to pay for. So those things are sort of out of our control, and we don't want to touch them. We pay for the annual FAA audit through the finance department, airport security fees paid to the police department, general fund administration fees, professional service for various departments that serve the airport, such as the legal staff, planning staff, purchasing, GIS, and others. All told, about 80% of our budget, like I mentioned, is pretty much out of control. But nevertheless, we took a look at what we could do, and bottom line is we have been able to think a little bit more deeply, more urgently about what we needed to do here to increase efficiencies per the direction of the council and the city manager, and we were able to propose a 4% overall cut in the operating expenses. That's before capital expenditures, just in the operating side. And we did that by cutting 13.3% from the personnel side and actually going up a little bit in the other operating expenses, about 1.9%. So overall, it's a 4% cut from the operating side of the budget in the airport. And I'll have to say that one of the biggest reasons for the increase in the operating side was 2 air shows that we're planning this coming year in one fiscal year. And that's going to require some overtime, 2 full weekends of overtime from 4 operations personnel, as well as some advertising cost and some airfield maintenance costs that had to go up just in case. Some of that is just in case. It's a budget. But if there's damage to the pavement from these 2 air shows, we can't wait around to go through a nonprofit organization to come back and eventually get it fixed, because the Vero Air Show group is actually responsible for it. But we can't wait for that to happen. We're going to have to fix the pavement and then go for reimbursement, so we have to have budget for that. So anyway, with all the cuts and expenses, we think we're still fine. We think that with the overall 4% cut, we'll be in good shape. The best way to take a look at the airport budget to start it off, I think, is on page 118. That's the summary that the finance director put together for the airport, showing the operating budget and showing that we have a total distribution of surplus of about $500,000 plus. A lot of that is because of revenues staying flat, maybe a little bit up, and the expense reductions that we've shown. So that's all I have to say, except I also would like to say to my wife, who's watching on television, happy anniversary.
Had to squeeze that one in.
Had to squeeze that in.
Good man. Cindy, on page 120, I see where there's a 40% reduction on interest on investment. What?
I'm sorry, Mayor. If you don't mind, could we start on page 119 instead of immediately to 120? Mr. Mayor, you state that there is a transfer of some of the employees going from the non-bargaining over to the bargaining, so they're becoming union members with this new budget?
Two of our staff members transferred or became members of the clerical union, and so the number of bargaining units went up by 2 in our department.
Okay.
We had 4 before, so now we have 6. And
on page 119, it states 7.
Yeah, I think that's an error. That should be what that should show is full-time non-bargaining 2. And I've recently forwarded this error change over to Javier at the finance department. I don't think this came out in time for your budget package. Should show 2 non-bargaining and 6 full-time bargaining for a total of 8 proposed for the coming fiscal year.
And the employee who will be let go as of the date of the budget, what is their current responsibilities?
That would be the airport business manager. The responsibilities primarily lie with leasing and management of the leasing facilities that we have at the airport. We do feel that in an attempt to again find some efficiencies and work with the city as a whole, that we're able to transfer some of those duties among other staff members, and also because of the economy the way it has been and is currently very slow, we think we can handle this without and absorb that loss.
My office is also going to become a little more involved in the leasing process at the direction of the council. You guys are saying we want to see economic development out there, and so Eric and I have discussed that we will be sharing some of those responsibilities as well.
I'm happy to hear that we will continue with the economic development with our enterprise zone at the airport. That's very important. The Chamber of Commerce has also been very involved in trying to promote our airport, and I appreciate that you all, with your expertise, will continue that function.
Vice Mayor Carroll, we followed your lead on that through Jim's direction, and we were able to start that focus group. Helene Castleton of the Chamber has actually started that, and we have our first meeting this month. So we're going to actually transfer some of the staff duties to some volunteers, is what it boils down to, and some business owners that will then feed back their expertise to the airport, and then we'll turn it into policy changes, which will come before Jim and the council.
Great. Thank you. And thank you, Mayor, for letting me come back to that page. Go ahead.
I was curious as to what caused a 40% reduction in the interest on investments.
Excuse me, primarily just relooking all the investment revenue estimates that we made last year in light of what really happened in 11-12. There has been a little bit of a drawdown of cash for capital projects, but mostly it's just, in 11-12 we actually earned $8,300. So I'm trying to be a little more conservative on all those estimates throughout the budget.
If I can, question on the airport rentals. We're seeing an increase of 10.5%. Is that due to increased rental rates, or are we actually finding additional tenants?
That I would say that's primarily due to a under projection for last year's revenue of $1,240,000. We're currently showing, if you look at the actual, are we looking on page 120, by the way?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
If we look on the right column there, you can see that in 2012 we had 1.4 million. This year we're projecting about 1.3 million. Actually, the projection shown is just the budgeted, because we always budget conservatively for revenue. We actually came in with about 1.34, and we're projecting 1.37, so it's not that big of an increase. And we're really just saying that it's going to stay the same, maybe 1 or 2 new leases in the next year. Again, staying conservative. We're not going to shoot for that, but that's what we're budgeting for.
Page 120. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say the year-to-date verifies what Eric says. It's 910, so 50% of that. You're right on his number.
Anything on 121? 122? By object?
Just a question. I know much of these charges, Eric, are out of your control. I know when we had the FAA audit, there was some question about some of the chargebacks. I'm not sure we ever got a response on that.
No, ma'am.
And I guess I'm looking at, obviously, a big hit that you take for airport security.
Can you explain that? What type of security is necessary, and what do those funds pay for?
Well, that would probably be more in the realm of the police chief to explain the cost there. I can say that we do have a lot of use of the Vero Beach Police Department on a daily basis. The city submitted a list of things that the city police department does for the airport to the Federal Aviation Administration over a year and a half ago to find out if these charges were legitimate and these could be properly charged, and we haven't had a response back yet from the FAA.
I'm sorry, I don't understand. So what actually do the police do for that $91,000 transfer?
Well,
we do have a list of items. I don't think we have it with us.
Well, just off the top of your head.
Okay, the real thing is we give the rolling patrols out there on a very frequent basis. We have officers, for example, when the...
So the police officers drive around?
That's correct. And we also respond similar to what the fire department does. We have people ready and available. If there's a special plane that comes in, for example, the vice president, we had our officers that go out and take that duty of what they're doing. If we have issues, for example, a plane that has coming in for landing that's not satisfactory, then we will send officers out for that type of, for security of the airfield and that kind of stuff.
And there are certainly times when I would, call for additional backup. We just recently had, as a matter of fact, we had I'll show it for everybody. We had a tabletop exercise, is what we call these. A review of emergency procedures that we do with all of the law enforcement emergency response. And we had 2 police officers show up for this event for several meetings that we had. And it was actually sponsored by the TSA, the Transportation and Security Administration. So we called them, we asked them to come out. The problem, we know that they support the airport. The problem is quantifying that, and we do not currently have an agreement, and we needed to get a response back from the FAA so that we could say, let's put this into a mutual aid agreement and then put it in writing so that we could then better quantify the numbers. In the meantime, we've used this number that has been generated from years past just to make sure that we give something back to the police department to support their efforts.
Technically speaking, the roads and the streets at the airport are private roads and streets, similar to a private community. They are owned and operated by the airport. Now, we obviously use those going to our water and sewer plant, except I think we even have our own access in some of those. But the rolling patrols in those would be different than what we do for example, a gated community in the community.
When we responded to the FAA audit, we actually did quantify what we felt like were the numbers based on patrols and man hours and some of the secondary costs, and came up with a number that was, I think, slightly higher than this, and submitted it, and also submitted as our action plan, I think what Eric alluded to, that we have an actual written negotiated agreement for fire protection services, and that the appropriate thing to do would be to have a written negotiated mutual aid agreement between the airport and the police department.
Right. The fire protection is through the county.
Right. And so what we're waiting for, I think, is a response as to whether, in general, it's legitimate to do that, in which case then Eric and the police chief would sit down and hammer out a written agreement with more definition to the extra support that's provided and a price.
Eric, is this common within other municipalities that have their own airport to have a requirement that they pay the police for driving around?
Some airports have their own police department, and it's very hard to compare apples to apples when it comes to airport against another airport. I think in Sebastian they have the Sebastian police, and then in St. Lucie County and Fort Pierce they have the sheriff's department. At Tampa they have the Hillsborough County, they have their own police force there that the airport pays for. So it varies.
All right.
Eric, on 122, about 3/4 of the way down, airside drainage maintenance, you got 132% increase there. What's a large blip that begs to be?
Oh yeah. Okay, let me go over that one. And put a note to myself, see detail, because I had some additional detail on that. That has to do with a drainage issue that we found that I think is going to need. In fact, I think Rob Bolton alluded to it in his review. There's an area there where there's a 60-inch pipe that's going to need to be replaced right under Aviation Boulevard.
He did.
And we haven't yet actually determined the total cost, but I added quite a bit of money in there to at least contribute to the cost of fixing that.
Okay, gotcha.
Because that was the area that we were still waiting to see if the MPO did the expansion on aviation, but we need to do something in the meantime with that project being on indefinite hold. Thanks.
Yes, ma'am.
That number is relatively, it's only 15,000. Yeah. So, I mean, you went from 6 to 15,000.
Right. Yeah, it's one of those things that I didn't want to really increase the budget a huge amount, but at the same time have something there. Once we get a better number, we may have to come back and either request a separate capital project if it's a huge dollar amount, or we might be able to do something to Band-Aid fix it until we get to the point. A lot of that will have to do with getting together with Monty and with Rob and what we're going to need to do. We're going to try to do the whole thing in-house if we can't. If not, we'll have to bid it out.
Mr. Mayor, there's a large increase in vehicle maintenance. Is there a particular vehicle which is requiring this? Or?
No, that was just directly from the garage, that number.
That's the reallocation of cost that we talked about.
The full cost allocation.
Thank you.
Anything else on 122? Go over to 123.
The transfer to the construction fund. The very last item on the list of expenditures by object.
All right, that is the dollar amount that we estimate we'll have to transfer from our surplus, our $500,000 plus, into construction. In other words, to match grants for federal and state projects that we'll be doing. And we actually have to relook at that, too. We got some new information since this came out. We'll probably have to talk to Cindy again because it might have to go up just a little bit. We have a major runway renovation coming up, and turns out the federal government is not going to fund as much as we had thought, which means more money from us. Yeah.
In the past, they've been funding about 95%. Isn't that correct?
90% to 95%. In this case, it's going to be more like 76%. 76%.
And this amount is being cut from other airports around the state?
Everybody's feeling the pinch these days, and especially smaller airports. I mean, obviously the Orlando's and Miami's and Tampa's, they're going to get the higher priority. And so we try to work what we can. And this is a runway rehabilitation. It's in our capital program for the Crosswind runway.
And I'd just like to take a moment to commend you and your staff, and Danielle particularly with your pursuit of the grants, how successful y'all have been preparing very good documents in a very competitive grant market to continue to support our airports. So thank you.
Also, just for informational purposes for the council, we sort of administratively go through a little entanglement that we don't want to build expectation by putting all these projects into the capital that we don't know if we can ever accomplish. So we're trying to define those capital projects that we actually feel like we can get money for. And so we're trying to make sure that our CIP sort of reflects what we really think we're going to get. So you may see amendments to that periodically because, as you indicated, and Eric uncovers a grant, and it may be a grant for runway or for whatever the case may be, that we have to insert projects. But it's important for him to have projects in there in order that the FAA sees that we're going to be applying for grants and that we would fit into some of those, because they want to make sure that the council has approved certain projects that he can seek funding for.
On 124. Eric, I see a 100% increase in overtime salaries. What's driving that?
The air show, Mayor.
Okay.
It's two 4-day periods, and with bargaining unit overtime, and I will have to have them out there. There's just no way around it.
Okay. You want to remind us, the public, of the time of the air show for us?
Sure. October 5th and 6th of this year. And we're moving ahead very well. I might add we're getting a lot of the paperwork into FAA and to others, and I think we're going to be on schedule to get that taken care of. We're expecting 10 to 15,000 people per day out at the airport, so it'll be a lot of activity, a lot good for business.
Need a little overtime.
Cannons will be busy, I'll tell you that.
A lot of police.
Eric, with the sequester cuts, will that be affecting some of the proposed fly-ins?
I believe so. This year for sure. Well, I can't even say for sure. There's really nothing for sure when it comes from the federal government. But I think that we were planning on an F-18 demonstration team, and that right now is on hold. But the good news is that for the 2014 show, when that's May 10th and 11th of 2014, which is a 7-month window between the October and the May show, both in the same fiscal year, we are anticipating that the Blue Angels will be sending a advance team to the October show, or in that general vicinity, time to take a look at the airport, see if we're safe and long enough runway, enough weight bearing capability, safety measures in place like the county fire trucks and the police. And then they are still on the schedule. The Blue Angel team, the full Blue Angel team, is on the air show schedule for May 10th. Still has not yet been cut. So we're hoping that both of those will happen, the advanced team on the October show and the full team on the May show.
And these programs are both being put on by one of our local civic organizations as well.
There's 3 exchange clubs, the 3 Vero Beach Exchange Clubs, Vero Beach Exchange Club, Indian River Exchange Club, and the Treasure Coast Exchange Club are combining efforts. They formed their own Inc. Corporation, nonprofit corporation, to run this, and they have a board of directors. I serve as a technical advisor and looking out for the city to make sure that they operate safely. Obviously, the license agreement worked out with the city attorney's office puts a lot of the burden on that organization to make sure that it's safe and that they pay for the services that they bring, and they pay for them porta potties and their own security. Mm-hmm. Probably 200 to 400 volunteers are expected to be needed for that. So, any other organizations such as Rotary that would like to help, we'd be happy to.
And the funds generated will be going to local charities as well as statewide charities?
We think that because of the cutback in the military assets, that we will not have as big of a profit margin as we had hoped, because there'll be less of a turnout because the military draws such a big group. So we think that a lot of the profit from the first year will go to seed money for the second show, which will be the big one in May. However, anything net obviously will go to the exchange clubs and their youth programs and prevention of child abuse.
Great. Thank you. Sorry for that little commercial. I just couldn't help myself.
I appreciate the opportunity.
No, we need to get that out to the public.
Also, Eric is very involved in the exchange clubs and very active roles.
Yeah. Okay, anything else on 124? 125? Nothing? 126, revenues?
Actually, this would be, as we've done with the other enterprise funds, a good opportunity to leave this book and go look at the 5-year capital, so we can put that capital expenditures for the current year in context. And yeah, it is 92, 93 in your 5-year CIP book. One of the things we did, just as a preface, a year or so back, I think you remember, is Eric and I kind of discovered that, again, as we talked about, even though all the subledgers of the enterprise funds roll up to one number in the CAFR, that there had been some accounting that left him with a negative number in his capital project fund, which, even though he had positive cash overall, made it a little difficult for him to look at his ledger and manage his operation, because he didn't know how much he had on the ops side and how much he had on the capital side. So you approved a budget amendment to make a transfer to right the ship in that regard, so that now what he has as a balance forward in his capital fund is put into this 5-year CIP, so that he has that in context when he looks at the capital programs he's actually able to do with his money and how the grants affect that situation. So with that, let Eric can speak to his projects.
Sure, I'll be happy to go over any project if you have any question. I mean, I do like the way that the finance director has laid out our capital program. It's a little bit different than we did in years past. I think the bottom line ends up the same, but we can see a little bit more clearly on how we're budgeting every year for each of the projects. As you can see in fiscal 14 coming up, we're looking at a big chunk of money for that runway, largely because of the runway rehabilitation. There's some other little projects that are going on. The master plan, well, I say little, it's an expensive plan, but that's also largely federally funded and dependent.
Do we have verification of the grant received for the master plan?
No, ma'am. Not at this time. As a matter of fact, we're going to send in the final grant application probably today or tomorrow. We've sent in a pre-application. It's a process. And the money has been programmed, but we have not yet been offered the funds. And then once we are offered the funds, we'll bring it to council for acceptance, along with all the other details with construction and on the runway project and the consulting agreement with the master plan.
Page 94, Wildlife Hazard Management Plan. We still got a bunch of hogs out there, Eric? Is this what this is about?
Well, we've done a great job in advance of the FAA's requirements. We are now required to have a wildlife hazard assessment, which has to be done by a FAA-approved biologist, and that has to be done by 2015. It's currently underway. Council's already approved the contract to move ahead with that. We're actually just showing the second year of the funding in this year. It's already been approved, and it's already about a third or so done. But what I was saying, we didn't wait for the FAA to tell us to do a study to handle the wildlife. We were able to, as you know, get the surplus from another capital project and do fencing around the airport, which is almost entirely complete at this point. And that fencing goes 2 feet into the ground as well as 8 feet above the ground with barbed wire. Doesn't keep the birds out, but it does keep out things like coyotes and foxes and hogs, and feral hogs were a problem. Those are big, and those are deadly to little airplanes. So, but that's almost done. We're working ahead. The study is going to say that, wow, they've got a great fence. I'm glad they did it. And we've got it in place. And it'll also probably recommend a few other little things if we can afford to do them. And Jim wants to do it, we'll do it.
95, taxi rehabilitation. That's pretty straightforward.
That goes alive. Actually, is that the taxiway Alpha and Echo? That one we're going to do along with the runway project, actually, to save some money. We're going to combine two into one. The contractor's already going to be mobilized, and we bid it out as two projects in one and saved about $1 million on that to everybody. To us, about how much? Quite a bit, because it's two projects. So the federal government gets the lion's share of the savings on that one, but they also pay the lion's share of the cost.
96, airport master plan. Where do you stand on that, Eric?
We have completed the scope of work to the standards of the FAA, and we're submitting the grant application today or tomorrow. We anticipate a grant sometime in August, and then we'll come to the council probably in September for acceptance. And then we'll issue notice to proceed in October. It should be done in March of 2015. And that will be our first in 15 years almost master plan review, and it's really due. We need to look at it. I'm going to be asking for a lot of public input on that through the Airport Commission, the City Council, and through charrettes we'll be having in town to make sure the community has their input on how they think the airport should evolve over the next 20 years. Because I just manage it. I don't really have to say what happens there. I want to hear from the community, and hopefully I'll hear good things, but we'll see what happens. As you can tell, Piper's already on board with working on the lead issue, and I think those things are going to take care of themselves over time. That's just something that's happening naturally.
Eric, can you elaborate just a bit on that? I just received the information in the last few days about their testing of the unleaded gas with one of their jets. So can you just elaborate a little bit on that?
They're testing a piston engine in a Piper Archer. It's a Lycoming 0360, I think it was, which is just a pretty basic piston engine, avgas burning engine that they're testing in an Archer. They have tested 93 octane, ethanol-free, lead-free automobile fuel, basically in this aircraft, and they're in the midst of that testing. So they're trying to make a step forward. Piper is, which I love, because this is not government telling us what we have to do. This is the business environment saying, here's what we think can work. They're testing it, and through that groundswell from the business community up through eventually the federal government, there will come back regulations to all aircraft manufacturers and fuel distributors on how to use unleaded fuel safely in the aircraft that we have, in the fleet we have, which is well over 160,000 in the U.S. alone of general aviation aircraft that use 100 low lead fuel right now, which is 100 octane ethanol free and 2 grams of lead per gallon fuel. That's what we use now at the airport. Do want to mention that the airport doesn't sell fuel. The FBOs, the businesses, sell fuel. And a lot of times, we're asked to regulate locally what our businesses can do, and really we don't do that. The city doesn't regulate.
Because if there was a market for it, then the individual businesses would step up and provide
Absolutely.
it. And since there's no market yet, then the engines are not utilizing
it's coming,
it.
But it's not here
so
yet.
Similar to when unleaded gas was started
transitioned
30, 40, 50 years ago in the United States. There was a transition period when private businesses would sell both before they would all transfer over to the one type.
Correct.
And business licenses do not allow us for regulation. We only issue a business license to show that they are in business at our airport.
Right.
It's a tax revenue or tax.
Thank you for going into that, because I think that's an exciting development with the research going on in order to allow that to be utilized by the engines. And again, it's the private owners who have the engines that can operate only a particular type at the moment.
Right.
97, just what you were talking about, the core commercial park, whether or not it's going to be renovated.
Well, we would like to do some renovations on our aging buildings and infrastructure that we have in the core area, the center airport area around Aviation Boulevard, Airport Drive, Piper Drive, Dodger Road, all around that area. We do not have a clear scope of work yet. The first step in this is getting council approval to pursue the grant, to get the grant, to then hire architect, engineer to develop a set of specs based on what we can afford. The state has agreed, based on an estimate that we came up with, to give us a 50% grant for this. So it'd be about a $400,000 grant, and then we would have to fund the other $400,000. And Cindy and I have found, we think we've found the money to fully fund that from the matching grant, matching side from the airport. But we'll better know as we get into the fiscal year too, I think. And we don't expect this grant until later in the fiscal year. The state fiscal year starts July 1st, so it just happened. And we'll be seeing if we receive that grant. And then Building 96, things like that, the roof in Building 96, that old warehouse that was left from World War II that's solid concrete but has a lot of wood in it too. And those things need to be renovated and brought up to code as best we can within the budget that we have.
And I can't emphasize enough how important this is for not only the enterprise zone but also economic development within our city, to have structures on the airport which we would like to lease out in order to be generating profits into the airport and into the city and create jobs, and yet the buildings are not up to code and they have sat for a while because there are repairs necessary. And we've had some difficulties in the past when people come in and take a look at them and say it's not something
we're
that
acting on it.
I know, and I'm very appreciative that we're going forward with this line item in the budget. So thank you for that.
What are we going to do with that old tank out there, Eric? The one that's been abandoned, the old fuel tank?
Well,
just leave it where it is? Well,
are you talking about the old water tank that's right on where Domar Stone used to be?
Right.
I can talk. Right. I can say Domar Stone to Craig.
Yeah.
that is almost. I mean, that is probably a couple feet thick of concrete with a dome. We've joked about maybe using that as a hurricane shelter because it's going to be very difficult to remove.
You use that for a bunker for...
Yeah, that'd be my office during the hurricane.
The new city hall.
Put a window. We got an estimate of about $40,000 just to demolish that thing. And so now we could use some of this grant funding to put into that, but then that doesn't improve anything. It just removes. So you have a way. Now, our hope was to lease that whole thing out and have the developer pay for the demolition or part of it. But with the economy drop, nobody's interested in spending any money. You have to almost have a building ready to go right now in today's market. So we're looking at trying to meet the needs. But that may just stay there until we can find some money that's just laying around, or a developer comes in to do it for us.
Yeah, I was going to say, it certainly doesn't seem to be a good use of funds, and it's not going to generate any additional revenue by removing that.
Right.
So.
98, rehabilitate taxway C.
That, if you look on your little map there, you can see the main taxiway, which is about 7,300 feet long and about 50 to 75 feet wide along different areas along that length that parallels the main runway. That has been maintained over the years with crack sealing and the best we can to maintain it, but we've found that the FAA is amenable to at least look at funding rehabilitation of that entire length, and we hope to do it within the next few years. Funding, all of these projects are totally dependent on
funding,
grant funds.
Federal grants. Yeah.
I mean, with a $500,000 surplus, which this is looking like it might be a good year, you can't. And this, a runway takes $3 million to renovate. You just can't do this without grant funds.
And 99, taxiway E. And that's going out to 2017, right?
Yeah, if we take a look at the map, you can see. See if I can point. How do I point it out to describe it?
This one here.
This section right here is taxiway Echo. This little taxiway here. The goal is to extend this taxiway out, and so we'd have parallel taxiways on the main runway. That would open up the core section of the airfield in this area here to aviation development along that taxiway. Without that taxiway, the only way to develop is to develop from the north ramp here out to the west. and put the burden of development on the developer, which very seldom can afford building a taxiway. So we've asked for funding, and actually we're going to look at just state funding on this one because it's unlikely that the federal government would fund that. But we're looking at finding grant funding in any way we can to get that taxiway done. But I have to point out, as we go out in further years, that project, as well as all the projects that we have further out, are going to be looked at during the master plan review. And there may be some projects kicked out. There may be some projects put in based on community input and the latest and greatest information that we receive through that process.
Yeah, that would open up that whole section. Okay, page 100, center apron, and that's going out to 2018.
Yeah, we're looking at just renovating some of the what's the blacktop area in the center area of the airport there. Some of those areas are starting to crack and take more and more maintenance to maintain. Typically, airports will maintain and construct ramp areas that they either have existing tenants on or are projecting new business to develop in that area. In this case, we have existing tenants paying rent on the land, paying rent on the ramp area. And so we typically will, if funding is available, try to maintain those. Obviously, sequestration, federal grants, state money dries up. We don't maintain a surplus. Those are the kind of things we'd have to put on the burden of our FBOs to maintain themselves. But it's a huge cost to do, so we try to do those whenever we can. And this one was actually listed in the past airport master plan to do.
Okay. And 101 is rehab the utilities. I guess that's the
Citrus
mobile
Park.
home park.
The sewer system there. We've already upgraded the entire water system. Now we have to go in and redo the sewer system in there, and that's the responsibility of the park owner, which is the airport. So we're looking
Which
at
is us. Huh?
It'll be grant funded, I hope, and otherwise it's going to be all our money. But that's one of the things we're going to have to do. I mean,
Is our occupancy in there rated? Is that a
71 out of 75 right now?
So we're fairly high occupancy.
Pretty good. Could
Being
be
a
better.
landlord of a mobile home park is a nightmare.
Yes.
We have some issues daily.
Is there the capability of the airport to divest that particular property?
Yeah, I was thinking that, and we have thought of it before. The problem is that the transition period, the amount of money per square foot that we make on a mobile home park is actually greater than if we were to lease the land flat out and have a developer take it over for a long period of time and just get the land rent, which would be far less. Right now it's about $150,000 a year in revenue, and we don't think we'd get $40,000 or $50,000 in land rent right now. So, plus there's state rules that have to do with mobile home parks that take time to transition the
Given a
homeowners.
certain number of years to transition out.
So we've been kind of caught in a rock and a hard place, but I think it's something to look at during the master plan discussion. There have been some ideas floated on how to transition that to maybe low-income housing that's actually concrete block construction versus mobile home park, and still retain the ownership of that and hopefully get the same bang for the buck and make the same revenue.
Or working with one of the nonprofits, for instance, Habitat for Humanity or something like that, to take from the mobile homes to small, even stick construction for homes.
We will look at that. It's not going to stay that, just because we're doing it now doesn't mean we have to do it forever. I agree with that.
If you could get out from under that, I'd find some way to do it.
Well, the people who move in and out, and then some people who have quit paying their rent moved out a year ago, and their family members or somebody else moved in, and it's
I know the code enforcement has a case going on in there right now. It's been going for quite a while now.
Yeah, and just to insert a little something that you may not know, but in a mobile home park, you don't just evict the tenant, you have to evict the mobile home.
Yeah.
And often the tenant then leaves the mobile home, and unfortunately it falls on Eric's department. If the mobile home isn't worth salvaging, they have to pay to have it removed and basically disposed of.
Because we don't own it, and we don't want to own it.
the salvageable numbers are pretty slim.
18 cents a pound. Okay, 102, runway 12, 30 left.
So that should be kind of an eyebrow raiser because we don't currently have a 12:30 runway, and we have an 11:29, one left and one right. Those are the two parallel runways. We're going to interestingly enough, through the Runway 4 rehabilitation project coming up this year, we're going to actually remark those two runways to 12:30 due to the magnetic change in the Earth's
the floating of the.
So we're going to actually, it's actually right now the magnetic heading for 11 left and 11 right, which means 110 in magnetic heading, is really now 118.
Wow.
So it's closer to 120, which means we got to change our runway designations to 12 to properly mark the runways. The FAA has asked us to do this about a year ago. It takes a lot of money to repaint. That's a lot of paint.
Wow.
And so we were able to get that remarking done in this Runway 4 project, so the feds would pay for what they want us to do, which is a safety thing. We want to make sure the pilot, the runway is marked for the proper magnetic heading. We don't want any issues, So, so when you see that runway 12:30, it's the same runway. It's just going to be marked differently, and we're going to rehabilitate the main runway. The last time it was done was 2004, and we're looking a little early. We're shooting for funding a little early to have that redone. We think it'll take 2 to 3 years before we get funding on that, so it might be 2020 before it happens.
Yeah, I see you got it marked out to 2018. So, okay, that should close you out, Eric. Do you have any other comments you want to make?
No, sir.
Any other questions? Cut me loose. Thank you, Eric.
Sure.
Do you want these back to use next time?
No, you can keep them. Suitable for framing.
They reflected in the city council's budget.
Thanks. Put it on our budget. Appreciate that. I think that's coming out of the airport budget.
The accurate what do we guys, accurate transfer of expenses?
Make sure that's out of their budget. Put that
Thanks,
line item
guys.
next year.
Take care. Have a good rest of the week.
Yeah.
Electric Fund.
Stay if you want. You're more than welcome.
Who's our next victim? Companions.
And
Come on down.
Well, these guys are coming up. I'll preface this with, if you look at page 63, as we discussed with the general fund, this is one that's going to be hugely different based on our change in assumption of the sale of the electric utility at the 6-month mark. I think the biggest difference is going to be is that with a full year, because essentially, other than a few things that were front or back end loaded, we just prepared a budget and chopped it in half. The biggest difference is going to be is with a full year of revenue and expenses, our net operating income is going to be such that once our debt service is covered and our transfer is covered, we should have not a negative number, but a positive or a flat one. As we talked about, at some point when we sell the electric utility, there's not going to be some, one day it's here or the next day it's gone.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a phase out period that includes receivables and, payment, and we have to escrow, depending on when we sell it, the money that we've set aside for debt payment because it can't be paid early. So any year that we budget for this and just pick a day and chop it off, it's not going to – the budget itself is not going to reflect the actual tail out of the fund and all the puts and takes on the balance sheet. So I don't want anyone to become alarmed by that number, because I would say in any year where we make this budget assumption, we're going to see some sort of, disconnect like that. So with that, I'll let these guys talk to the specifics.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Would you like to make an opening statement?
Here we go. From Power Resources, Tom Richards from Power Resources. Just want you to know that the budget you see in front of you is proposed as the assumptions have been placed on us to assume that the sale of the FPL goes through at the April 1st mark, which is a half of a fiscal year for us. So most of the budget you'll see here is about a 50% reduction from current year. We are now in a very conservative spending mode at the power plant, which is a different kind of approach than we've taken in the past. And you'll see that primarily in the capital improvement plan, which we have already run by and gotten approved by FPL. Just so that to put things in perspective, based on my discussions with the FPL folks who have been in the plant, their plan when they take over is to only operate units 5 and 2, which is the combined cycle, and only probably until the end of the summer 2014. That's when they plan to resolve their transmission difficulty that they have, and I understand that is underway now, going on. I haven't confirmed that. At that point, then, they have no more need for the plant in terms of power supply. So, in summary, depending on when they actually do take over, they may retire the plant the day they take over. Now, there still are T&D functions in the plant that have to be resolved, and that'll take some time, but they actually have no value at all, place no value at all in the other generating units. Based on that, we have taken the attitude that we won't spend any major money to keep those units running.
Also, just for clarification, Tom and I have talked, in case the sale did not go through for some reason, that this would be the same mode we would be recommending to the City Council, that the possibility of us being competitive in the generation business is somewhat remote. And so we feel like that we're going to be gauging our capital expenditures based on the assumption either way that the divesting of the electric system should go. So we're sort of gearing up for what the future needs of that power station would be.
Mr. Rich, although I guess FPL's approved the capital plan and the way we're moving forward with the maintenance area, is there anything with our OUC contract? I know we have requirements in maintaining the system at a certain level until we sell, or until the sale goes through. Any restrictions within that contract that would require us to be doing anything differently?
The OUC contract does require us to incorporate the units 5 and 2 of the combined cycle in that process of calculating what the amount of capacity that they sell to us each year. And that's adjusted each year based on a forecast and so on. We would want to go back to OUC if we decide to retire 5 and 2 and let them know. And I think that won't be difficult. I've talked with them informally about that, and they said they can accommodate whatever we want to do in terms of our end, in terms of operation. So that's not a major issue for them. They understand, and they understand the needs of the community or what they are.
Tom's been very good at keeping OUC informed of to what we're doing and how our capital plan's going, as well as Florida Power and Light.
As a sidebar, Jim, what are we doing about the radio antennas on those towers? We have a contract with them?
We have, I think, 3 contracts, and we have advised all those vendors that we will be vacating the facility and the plant will be coming down. FP&L has made contact. It's my understanding. I have not been involved directly with those conversations with those vendors as well. So we're working through some of those issues. We want to retain we don't want to give a termination notice because we want to retain the revenue stream coming to us until we're sure that this would be the closing date and it would go forward. But we are trying to work those issues.
They're aware that something's going to happen here.
Yes, sir, they are. And we have renewed one 2 years ago, I believe, wasn't it, Tom?
I believe so.
And that renewal is probably our longest, and it goes to 2017 or something like that.
Okay. Anybody have any questions on page 63 on the opening statement? It is quite a cut. On 64, I had underlined customer service here, 144% decrease, but I guess I understand that.
Exactly. That will switch back around with the reversal of the assumption that we sell at the because that's actually a charge out of customer service to the other entities. So.
And you had a huge cash carryover, Cindy, 4,652% the very last line.
And that is actually, as we recall from the way these are constructed, a positive number is a negative thing. Right. So that actually is the number that you see here of essentially a shortfall of $3 million because of that half year of revenues with a full year of debt service payments. So that's kind of what we had talked about before. And again, that should right itself as we reverse that assumption about the half year sale.
Anything on 65? And 66, expenditures by objects. I had nothing on that page.
Again, you'll see almost every single one of them is different by 50%. There'll be a lot more clarity in this the next time you see it.
see a lot of, I guess it's going to be deferred maintenance. I see something like hydraulic equipment maintenance on page 67 going down 10,000, or down 5,000. All this is dropping off state and motor maintenance,
Mm-hmm.
is that just going to be deferred? We're just not going to do it, in other words?
It's all just half a year, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, just a half a year's worth of work, basically.
So when you see this budget again, most of these numbers will essentially double, and then they'll have
Come
some
back up, yeah.
relationship to what they were in the prior year.
Okay.
Industry standards is a critical part of this whole assumption. We will be maintaining our facilities up to industry standards, so we have to meet that as part of our contractual agreement with Florida Power and Light, as well as running a safe plant.
And on page 68, anything there? About the same thing. Page 69, power resources.
Mr. Mayor, I suggest we just move on to the review of the capital planning, the electrical, unless anybody else has any question with the operating. I mean, they presented this as half a year. I think
I agree.
I'm not sure there's anything else for us to add unless somebody has a specific question.
I do have one question.
And I have some things to add about customer service when you're done.
Okay.
So.
On page 73, we see that customer service, this may be the same thing you were looking at. We had a decrease of one employee. Was that an employee that left? Or was that an employee that is budgeted for? What's going on there?
That is a person who's currently employed. That was a change we were planning to make at 1 October, given the directive to try to become more efficient and look at our operations. That's a field operations personnel. The other change you see is primarily this change at the sale to FP&L. And if I could have just a minute, I'd like to clarify some things about customer service. Regardless of the sale of the electric utility, customer service remains. As we talked about yesterday when we talked about Rob's operation in water and sewer, what we need to do is move towards making our customer service function combined with the water and sewer utility right-sized and appropriate to Rob's operation, because at that point it'll be almost entirely him. A little bit of support to solid waste, but primarily billing. We don't get a lot of customer service calls. But based on some feedback I received yesterday evening, I want to clarify something. I took the direction yesterday to come up with a 6-month plan for phasing out the cashier window. That is completely different than phasing out customer service. To this point in time, I haven't received any direction that would tell me that we're eliminating customer service either before or after the sale of the electric utility. So I want people to understand that when it comes to coming into the customer service lobby, initiating or changing service, getting your questions answered about billing problems, or even calling on the phone to do so, all of that will still be there. We're simply talking about the physical cashier window where once you've resolved all your customer service issues, you walk up and pay your bill. But we're certainly not talking about eliminating, even in the 6-month time frame, I haven't heard any direction to eliminate the customer service function, which is completely different. So, basically we're just, the 15 people that you see here, the way the purchase and sale agreement stands right now, are on the list to be transitioned to FP&L. Okay. But once they're gone, we're going to work primarily with water and sewer to make sure that we have the appropriate size customer service department, and that we cross-train to the maximum extent possible to support other functions, the billing in the back of the house, the cashiering, et cetera.
I would also like to bring up one concept and the capability of the city in terms of the number of employees that right now we have within the electrical operations. If, in fact, we do have an employee leaving between now and the sale, I would recommend it be the policy that we do not backfill that position, that we utilize the cross-training that you guys have done in order to fill that position, to have less impact at the sale. I don't know if we are legally bound to offer that position then out and backfill it. But in terms of the lowest number of employees and the hit to the city for the employees that we transfer over, I want to throw that out as an option.
It really depends on the position. For example, if you lose a lineman, you don't want to dismantle a crew, because if you lose a lineman and you don't have that crew out there. We are looking at it from position, and as a position becomes vacant, and I think there was one down, isn't there, Ted? There was one that we left vacant And so we are looking at, but it's really position by position, because you've got not only having the crews out in the field, but for our NERC compliance, if we had our NERC officer leave, you got to fill that position. So we are looking at that and doing the so-called hiring freeze, and Cindy and I have talked about that.
All right.
And so, but we're sort of managing the personnel, especially in the electric, but also throughout the whole organization.
As long as we are all on the same page with that will be done for each particular position if those come available before the sale.
That is correct.
Thank
We will
you.
be reviewing those.
I have one question, and we were looking at projected revenues for the electric unit for next year. Have we received anything as far as our fuel costs projections from FMPA?
Other than what they put in their approved budget, which I actually looked at very carefully, FMPA hasn't provided us anything for next year yet. And primarily our projections are to assume that costs go up about 1 or 2%. That's pretty close.
Okay,
And
just
the
trying to
volume
know what your
doesn't change
assumption is.
much. We're just not getting much growth. So obviously it can vary month to month depending on the weather, but on a trend basis, we still don't see much growth.
But you just assumed a 1 to 2% increase in our fuel cost.
And the revenue side of this, as it stood when we proposed it, was tied to the most recent version of the utility rate sufficiency rate revenue projections, basically half of that. So if and as we update that as we go through the summer, these revenues would be updated to reflect our latest projection.
Thank you.
I'll stop on page 75 for a moment. Under transmission distribution, there's minus 53 people on there. Some of these people will be absorbed by Florida Power and Light, correct?
All of them.
All of them?
Yes.
Okay. And as Pilar said, there's really nothing else in the back here. If anybody has anything else, 77, 81, non-departmental on 82 and 83. I have nothing on those. If anybody has something, stop me. Otherwise, we'll go over to the beige book on page 30, electric fund.
Also, to explain that you may be hearing as we go through this, we also have our fiber optic system. Ted's sort of heading that effort up because that's going to be a transitional thing where we retain ownership of that. And then one of our largest customers will be Florida Power and Light at the end of the day, and we're trying to negotiate through those contracts. We're also trying to negotiate with our other two partners, i.e. the schools and the county, as to the maintenance operation and the fees and how we distribute that cost center throughout that system. But Ted sort of heads that up. And if you have any questions about the fiber optics,
while you're there, Ted, good morning.
I'll throw him out in front of the bus anyway.
Throw him under the bus, yeah. What portion of our cable is lit? I mean, how much is active?
I would say probably 70%.
Oh, that much? Oh, that's great. I was thinking somewhere around 30.
I can get the exact number for you.
No, I'm looking for a rough order of magnitude, yeah. And who is our major customer? The county, the school board?
FP&L and
FP&L.
one other PDM net. Two customers.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Kramer has been working on trying to get us some additional customers coming up from the south, and I think that's still being discussed.
That has been done with from Ed Fielding down there. So far, it's I guess it's kind of been put on the back burner. I haven't seen where they're going with it yet.
Take all we can get, right? On the capital review program, page 31.
One overall comment about this, as we've indicated, each time we've updated this, we send it to FP&L and have a conversation with them about it in accordance with the PSA. This goes out, that 5 years. 4 years and not beyond it, because at this point it's predicated on the worst case scenario of the PSA for the closing date. But you'll also notice that, again, as we talked about with the other funds, we have a pretty big balance going into 12-13 in funds in the capital fund, and we maintain some level of that balance in the capital projects fund all the way through the end of this. At the end of this, if we did everything according to this plan, we'd still have almost $1.2 million. that's because as we do projects, we'd like to have adequate money in the capital fund for as things change. But certainly that residual balance is part of the $35 million that we would have remaining to us at the close of the sale. So that money doesn't go anywhere. It'll fall back into the remaining resources, and it will depend on where this knocks off as to how much we have sitting in the
we'd transfer that into the general fund?
Well, it'll be part of the residual balance in the electric utility that'll be used for paying off the unfunded pension liability and whatever other direction council gives us to do with it. So,
my point is, it's not tagged. We can use it for what we need.
Absolutely. So it just sits in this part of the electric utility fund to provide a cushion, but it's there as part of the available residual resources for whatever you want to do with it.
Great. Page 33. We got a roof falling off. We got leaking roof over there.
Oh, more than one.
Patchwork quilt.
Originally, we had money in the budget to replace roofs on the maintenance building, and it's also part of the main plant. We've reduced that to primarily doing some patchwork, which we will have to continue to do as long as we own the facility. It's especially the maintenance buildings in very poor condition. I mean, you can stand inside and see daylight through the
Whoa.
So it's really bad.
So it's not.
Trying to get by.
It's not bad unless it's raining.
Not.
It's only when it's raining. That's the good news.
During the dry season, we're doing good.
More roof repair on 34. And that's for the next few years. I see it stops after 3 years. That's a good answer. Steam trap replacement on 35. I take it this is for Unit 2 and 5 and 2. Is that right?
Yes, those will be as needed. And I've just actually put a couple of different little projects in here just to have a little bit of capital money in case we need to do something and keep the plant running.
Yeah.
I actually don't have a specific plan. Steam traps are in the plan, and if we find we don't need to do that, we'll postpone it. If we can find something that's a higher priority.
Sure, you got to have reserve. Yeah,
just a little bit.
It's called good planning. On 36, Unit 5, aux cooling water.
Again, just to have kind of a placeholder in the budget next year in case we need a little bit of capital money to take care of something that can't be covered in the maintenance budget.
Yeah, got you. And 37, decommissioning. I'm kind of interested in this because what portion of the decommissioning is our responsibility?
Well, that's a good question. I just wanted everyone to know that if FPL doesn't take over the plant, that eventually the plant would be retired, and that won't be for free. And to demolish the plant will cost some money. I don't have a specific estimate. I just wanted to alert everyone that it won't just drop off and become a zero budget at the end of its life. Someone will have to spend some money to take the building down and remove all the equipment and take care of any issues you might find there.
Tom, what was your experience with Fort Pierce when they demolished theirs?
Well, actually, we had a really good experience there, and it was fortuitous because at that time the commodity market was very hot, was very, very pricey, and the demolition contractors actually paid us to take the plant down and take all the materials and equipment. I don't think that would happen today.
That's happening for us, is what you're saying. Yeah.
And don't forget, even in the FPL arrangement, they have limited their liability for environmental remediation to $500,000, and we know there's asbestos in the plant. It's well known, and that may be well more than $500,000 to remove that one.
Well, the asbestos in the plant are their responsibilities. So that taking down the plant, that $500,000 is only in the ground.
Oh, okay, I misspoke.
So the contract, and it's pretty specific about that. But the issue,
because we did say that they were taking the slabs down as well, so it would be below the slab level.
Well, we're still debating over the slabs and the foundations, because slab is one thing, the footers are the other thing, and how deep do we want to go? And so, but we have said anything from the slab up is part of their removal of the facilities and the plant itself. But as Tom says, anything after that, we would be
in negotiations.
And he also had a learning experience as to environmental remediation at Fort Pierce. Hopefully, we'll take a little bit different tack on that.
Yeah, it's a long story, but it was complicated and it's still not done.
It's still not resolved?
Still not resolved because of a number of things.
Okay.
Have a loss of control.
Some assumptions that they made that we hopefully will learn from their experience.
I think the $1 million is optimistic. And 38, your reconductor feeders.
Yes.
I was under the impression that Florida Power and Light was going to take care of this.
No, that's all based off of load. If we got to go in and reconductor a line for load, we have to do that.
Over the next 3 years, or over the next year. You got this for 3 years, 4 years.
Worst case.
It's actually been for years a sort of an ongoing annual amount that they use as needed. So, again, this capital project 5-year CIP just assumes all the way out to 16, 17 and not beyond based on the worst case sale date. Okay. So if at whatever point we stop being in this business, that's where this would drop off. Mm-hmm. And that's for a lot of these items, and I'll let them speak to specifics. These are just, you'll see ongoing annual amounts that have just Correct. Been the norm for years in terms of putting money aside for as-needed refurbishment.
Recurring costs.
Absolutely.
Okay. And you got a PC on 39.
I'm sorry, that's actually 6 PCs, 2 desktops and 4 laptops. Yeah. With the rest of the few employees that we are taking off the payroll as of October, there will probably be some PCs available. Being that all items that are part of the electrical system transfer over to FP&L and become their property at the sale, I would not recommend purchasing additional computers, just transferring those around throughout the entire enterprise as we can.
We could certainly take a look at that. A lot of the people that we're eliminating in October 1st are actually field personnel, so they don't have PCs and desktops. But we'll go back and talk with IT and have a look.
See if IT perhaps
if we will be surplusing some desktops, absolutely.
Good point. Thank you, Tracy. Page 40, and I assume this is the same thing, just reoccurring cost every year that we have to plan for.
Correct.
I believe all the remaining items are just continual maintenance, so unless somebody has some specific question or whatever, I suggest we conclude that.
Yeah. Annual amounts.
Overhead underground. Outdoor lighting, meter equipment. Yeah.
Yeah, the specifics are sort of down 51, 52. There are some, UPS batteries and things that are not just the annual ongoing, but they're fairly small. So.
Okay. Rebuild switchboard, stationary blanks. You have any other comments, Tom? No. Ted?
No, sir.
Anybody else have any questions?
I just have a question on page 50. Perhaps Mr. Kramer can tell us a little bit about what's going on with that. We're expending $100,000 onto the fiber optic program this year.
Ted, I think, will be the guy.
That is a NERC compliance issue that we have to take care of to have redundancy on our master system in our control room. So we have to.
If we have to do it, then
Yes.
Okay.
that's a good answer. Well, it's
That'll
not a good
work.
answer. It's an answer.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
We're going to take a 10-minute break.
We're done for the day, aren't we?
Oh, no, risk management.
Now we got risk management.
That's not going to take too
How
long.
long is that going to take? If it doesn't take
Not that long. 161.
Okay, 5 minutes.
Yeah, just take a 5-minute break.
All right, we must. We can start it and just go through it.
Herd them in here.
That wouldn't be nice. That wouldn't be nice.